None of us like to talk about it, but it is the one reality we cannot escape. One day, we will all die. The daily news is a reminder to us of that. Every day there are announcements to tell us how many people have died from COVID-19. It's sad and it's tragic. And yet for the Christian, death is not the end. We do not need to fear death. Let's read from our verses, Romans chapter 8, verses 10 and 11. But if Christ is in you, then even though your body is subject to death because of sin, the Spirit gives life because of righteousness. And if the Spirit of him who raised Jesus from the dead is living in you, he who raised Christ from the dead will also give life to your mortal bodies because of his Spirit who lives in you. There's two things I'd like us to notice from these verses. First, sin leads to death. One day, we will all die. Verse 11 reminds us that we have mortal bodies, that these physical bodies that we live in will one day come to an end. We do not go on forever and forever. But why? What is the reason for that? Well, when we die, we won't get a death certificate, but somebody else will, and it will have on it cause of death. And it will tell us the reason why we have died. Perhaps it's cancer. Maybe it's natural causes like old age. Or maybe a virus itself. Now, while there's some truth in that, verse 10 gives us the deeper and true reason why we will die. Your body is subject to death because of sin. Our physical bodies will die. And the reason I will die and you will die is because of sin. Sin is simply us pushing God from his position of power and rule and putting ourselves in place of God and acting as if we have all power and rule. The sad and tragic consequences of that is death. We will one day all die. But there's another reality that I'd like us to see, and that is the Spirit gives life. You see again in verse 10, the Spirit gives life because of righteousness. Righteousness simply means to have right standing before God, to be accepted before him. That happens through faith. Jesus died for our sin. He took the blame for the wrong things we have done. But not only that, through faith, we receive the obedient life of Christ. So we are now seen by God as righteous. We are declared not guilty, accepted before him. It is a new and eternal life, a wonderful life. And if we are in any doubt about that, look at verse 11. If the Spirit who raised Jesus from the dead is living in you, then he who raised Christ from the dead will also give life to your mortal bodies through the Spirit who lives in you. When Jesus Christ rose from the grave, he rose with a physical body. And so we too will rise again with a resurrection body. New life forever and forever. With bodies that will never die again and never face disease again. We will never have any plague and we will not have any pain. This is the reality of those who have the Spirit of God within them. The Spirit that raised Christ from death will also raise us from death. There are two realities. One is sin leads to death. That is true for me and true for you. But for those who have the Spirit, they will be raised to new life